If your name literally translated to, the one who listens, I mean, people would naturally expect a very specific kind of personality from you.
Oh, definitely. You'd probably picture, like, a monk. Or maybe a therapist.
Right. Someone incredibly calm, deeply grounded, the kind of person who just absorbs the world around them before they ever take any action.
Yeah, exactly. A very peaceful presence.
But what if your actual historical legacy was leveling an entire city in a fit of absolute deafening rage?
It is really the ultimate human paradox. You have this massive disconnect between an innate, beautiful gift and its total violent corruption.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So today we're doing a deep dive into an excerpt from a really fascinating document called The 12 Tribes of Israel, Chapter 3, Simeon.
It's a great text.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission for today is to explore the archetype of Simeon, who is the second son of Jacob. And we want to use this to help you, the listener, navigate that razor-thin line between righteous clarity and, well, destructive reactivity in your own life.
Because it's a line we all walk, right?
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this. Simeon's name is rooted in the Hebrew word shama, which translates to hear. But his story is, it's anything but quiet.
No, not at all. And today's sources aren't just dry history. We are essentially looking into a psychological mirror.
A mirror for our own behavior.
Exactly. Simeon's story really forces us to look at our own internal struggles with morality, with judgment, and specifically with how we wield our own power when we feel we've been deeply wrong.
Which happens to all of us.
Right. But to grasp that esoteric metaphor, we really have to establish the literal historical tragedy that set this entire archetype in motion.
Yeah, the literal actions are intense. We have to start there. So Simeon is the second son of Jacob and Leah.
Right.
And he and his brother Levi led a incredibly bloody retaliatory massacre against the city of Shechem.
And this is detailed in Genesis 34. It happened after their sister Dinah was violated.
Right. And from their perspective, I'm sure this was entirely about familial honor. I mean, they probably felt totally justified in their vengeance.
Yeah. Oh, they definitely thought they were doing the right thing. But Jacob, their father, saw it entirely differently.
Yeah, he was not happy.
Not at all. On his deathbed in Genesis 49, rather than blessing them, he actually issues a curse. He calls them instruments of cruelty.
Wow.
Yeah, and he declares that because of their uncontrolled anger, he will, quote, divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel.
Which is a pretty heavy thing to hear from your dad on his deathbed.
Definitely. And what is so striking is that this isn't just poetic phrasing. It becomes a literal geographic reality for the tribe.
Right, because by the time we get to the book of Joshua, specifically Joshua 19, Simeon's allotted land is just entirely absorbed into the much larger territory of Judah.
Exactly. They essentially lose their distinct identity as a tribe.
They just fade out, like poof. And then Moses completely omits them from his final blessings later on in Deuteronomy 33.
They're just gone. And rabbinic sages like W. Gunther Plaut, they say this is the spiritual cost of misdirected justice.
It's like, think about it like this. Imagine Simeon is built like a incredibly sophisticated, highly sensitive radar dish. Or, someone born with perfect pitch.
Oh, I like that perfect pitch analogy.
Right. Because they have this incredible ear for music. That's the gift of Shama, to really hear. But instead of listening and receiving, they inexplicably choose to only play chaotic, ear-splitting heavy metal.
Yes. They fry their own circuitry.
Exactly. They destroy the very sensitivity they were built for.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the mechanism of that curse.
What do you mean?
Like, how does a whole tribe just vanish spiritually from history because of one incident of overzealous justice?
Well, because uncontrolled zealotry consumes its own foundation.
Wow.
Yeah. When your entire identity becomes built purely on reaction, outrage, and vengeance, you don't build infrastructure. You don't build a sustainable culture.
You just kind of rage.
Exactly. You burn incredibly hot, and then you just burn out. It is a self-eradicating energy.
That makes a lot of sense.
What's fascinating here is how this historical vanishing act actually gave birth to a powerful esoteric archetype.
Oh, right, because they fade from literal history.
Exactly. He fades geographically and steps into mystical tradition as a symbol of the dangerous psychological stage of inner division.
Okay, yeah. So if he vanished because he acted as a purely destructive, dividing force, it totally makes sense that esoteric traditions adopted him as the ultimate symbol of duality.
Right. He represents the sacred function of separation.
And the material actually contrasts him with his older brother Reuben, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Reuben represents pure, unformed matter, like just raw, unrealized potential.
So if Reuben is the raw block of stone, Simeon is the sword that cuts into that matter.
Perfectly said. He is the discerning principle that begins to separate light from shadow and truth from illusion.
Which is a necessary step.
It is.
Yeah.
In alchemy, this is known as the separatio stage of the opus magnum, or the great work.
Separatio, so separating things out.
Right. Before you can achieve any kind of golden, unified enlightenment, you have to take the messy, dissolved ego and start actively sorting the pure from the impure.
And that requires a blade, which is usually painful.
Oh, absolutely. It corresponds to the awakening of conscience, which is a very painful inner disillusionment. Suddenly, simple things become complex.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because we're talking about a blade. But there is a huge difference between a surgeon's scalpel and a street fighter's knife.
Oh, that is a fantastic analogy.
Right, because both use a blade to cut. But one requires like a decade of training to heal somebody, while the other is just reactive destruction in an alleyway.
Exactly. And the sword is a highly dualistic symbol in these traditions. On one hand, it represents the word divine clarity, the logos.
The ultimate truth.
Right. But a sword, mechanically speaking, is designed to sever things, to cut. The tragedy of Simeon is that he wields the sword of discernment instinctively and reactively rather than wisely.
He's the street fighter, not the surgeon. I do want to push back on this a little bit, though.
Okay, go for it.
So, is this separatio, this messy, violent cutting away of illusions, is it actually a necessary mechanism for your spiritual evolution? Like, can't we just skip the sword phase entirely and lean into compassion?
I mean, bypassing the sword phase sounds really appealing, but no, there are no shortcuts.
Really?
Because it actually leads to a kind of toxic passivity. You cannot integrate your shadow until you have first separated it out, laid it on the table, and examined it clearly.
Oh, so if you skip the discernment, you just accept everything.
Exactly. You end up blindly accepting behaviors or systems that are actually deeply harmful.
So we need the boundaries the sword creates.
Right. The blade wounds, yes.
Right.
But it also heals. The danger is that discernment without compassion becomes judgment, and judgment without balance devolves into cruelty.
So the trial is learning how to use the blade consciously, which brings us to the frameworks. Because to understand how to balance this internal sword, we have to look at how ancient systems of wisdom map out the architecture of balance.
Yes, specifically Freemasonry and Kabbalah.
Right, so in Freemasonry, Simeon aligns with the Fellowcraft degree,
which is the stage of intellect, balance, and polarity. It sits right in the middle.
And the Fellowcraft is handed very specific tools to manage this stage, right? The plum and the square.
Exactly. And these aren't just symbolic decorations. They represent the actual mechanics of moral physics.
Like finding absolute true vertical with a plumb line.
Right. It measures your moral uprightness against the overwhelming gravitational pull of your own ego and biases. And the Fellowcraft physically stands between the two great columns, Boaz and Jachin,
which represents strength and stability,
Yeah.
the ultimate symbols of polarity. So the goal is to stand in the middle and learn the wisdom of tension.
Yes. You have to actively hold two opposing truths in your mind simultaneously. Simeon's failure was acting before that wisdom ripened. He violently collapsed that tension because he couldn't handle the discomfort.
You just had to relieve the pressure.
Exactly. And there's a brilliant quote from Albert Pike here. The sword of truth must be wielded by the hand of mercy.
The sword of truth must be wielded by the hand of mercy. That is so good. And it maps perfectly onto the Kabbalistic lens, which really shows the peril of unbalanced force.
It does. In Kabbalah, Simeon aligns with the Sephira of Chokmah.
Which is wisdom, right?
Right. Wisdom, dynamic potential, masculine energy. But Chokmah, left entirely to its own devices, is just reckless inspiration.
It's all fire.
Exactly. The Zohar describes it as vision without vessel.
Which is such a great phrase. It's like, think of Chokmah as that brilliant aha moment at 2 in the morning.
Oh, we all know that feeling.
Right. It feels like pure, unadulterated fire. It feels amazing.
But the Zohar teaches that Chokmah has to integrate with Bina.
Which is understanding.
Right. Bina acts as the vessel, or the prism. It takes that pure fire and gives it structure, so it can produce da'at, which is knowledge.
But wait, doesn't forcing that pure, fiery inspiration through the filter of cold, hard understanding, doesn't that sometimes kill the magic of the idea?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it might feel that way. It might feel like the structure is killing the dream.
Yeah, nobody likes structure when they have a passionate idea.
True. But without the vessel of understanding, the fire of wisdom just burns the house down.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Simeon is the ultimate cautionary tale of the initiate who moves too quickly from zeal to action. He had the pure vision of justice for his sister, but he refused to pass it through the prism of Bina.
He completely lacked the temperance of humility.
Exactly.
And this fiery imbalance is perfectly mirrored in his astrological associations, which ironically loops us right back to the tragic disconnect of his name,
Astrologically, Simeon is associated with Aries.
the first sign of the zodiac.
Right. And Aries is ruled by Mars, which is the planet of war.
So it's pioneering, it's aggressive, and it's instinctively active.
Very active. And the sword emblem appears again here. As the Tyler of the Masonic Lodge who guards the threshold with a drawn sword, and as the flaming sword guarding Eden in Genesis 3.24.
So Simeon stands at the gate, but he is compelled by the fire itself, not by discipline.
Exactly. And this is where the root of his name, Shama, becomes so profound, because Shama is the root of the Shema Yisrael.
Hear, O Israel.
Yes. Simeon's fall was that he only heard his own reactive emotions. He heard his own blood pumping, but he couldn't hear the deeper voice of spirit.
It reminds me of, like, a runner at the starting line of a high-stakes race.
Okay, yeah.
They are so pumped up with adrenaline, just overflowing with that Aries martial energy, that they sprint off the block before actually hearing the starting pistol.
That is the perfect image. They feel incredibly powerful, but they've completely disqualified themselves.
Because they didn't wait to hear the signal. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Does this framework actually give us a roadmap for redemption?
It absolutely does. Simeon's shadow is not the final word. If you can learn the discipline of true listening, the sword transforms.
It stops being a weapon.
Right. It transforms from an instrument of cruelty into the tongue of fire and the voice of prophecy. You transform martial instinct into sacred guardianship.
That is incredibly powerful. So synthesizing everything from this deep dive, we're essentially looking at what the text calls the inner gate of Simeon.
Yes, the gate of discernment.
It's that moment you pick up the sword, but you do it to refine, not to harm.
Exactly.
Recognizing the immense danger of crossing that line from clear discernment into arrogant self-righteousness.
Which raises an important question for all of us. How do you actually discern between righteous action and reactionary zeal?
Right. What voices within you are merely reaction and which are true revelation?
That is the ultimate work.
It really is. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, applying this directly to the world we're navigating right now.
I think this is so relevant today.
It is. I mean, we live in an era completely dominated by algorithmic outrage. Social media platforms are literally engineered to bypass Bina, to bypass understanding, and just elicit rapid-fire emotional reactions from us.
It's just constant fire.
Exactly. We are constantly being handed a digital sword and told to swing it at the outrage of the day. And it makes me wonder, are we as a society living in a collective simian state?
Wow. All reaction, no reflection.
Right. Perhaps the ultimate act of modern spiritual warfare isn't drawing our swords to fight every single online battle.
That's a profound thought.
Maybe the most powerful discipline thing you can do is simply put the blade down, turn off the noise, and finally choose to Shama, to truly hear.